Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Soini Gray and this is From the South, the evening news brief from Telesur English. We start this new edition right now. Venezuela's regional elections are barely a day away and all of the voting logistics are already in place. Reporting restrictions came into effect at midnight, which means no media can report on the parties or their campaigns until the polls close. This will be the 22nd set of elections since the Bolivarian Revolution began 19 years ago. It comes on the heels of July's election of a National Constituent Assembly, which put an end to months of violent opposition protests. All the main opposition parties are standing candidates on Sunday.
We are here just to watch and to take notice of what's going on without having some prejudice.
Right now we are collecting a lot of information, how the system is worked. You have electronic system, voting system. So the first thing you know how your electronic voting system works. Is it secure? Is it not secure? That information regarding is given us by CNE and their experts. And if there are convenience, how they will solve those problems.
So on the Sunday we are going to several places to collect information to see for ourselves how things have been developing.
Are you confident, or what are your thoughts on exactly what the CNE has put in place and the job that they're doing to ensure that this is a free and fair election?
So let me tell you a holistic view. They are doing a good job, in my opinion. You cannot give a specific opinion because you are a few days here. You cannot make a statement that says it's good or not. But I think what I've seen until now, they are prepared for the elections and they are doing everything to have a good election.
Our correspondent in Caracas, Regan Devines, joins us live now. Regan? Hi Regan, are you hearing me?
Hi Soini, good to hear from you and see you this evening. It's Friday evening. We are at that point where just in less than 48 hours, Venezuelans will be taking to the polls to cast that vote to choose 23 governors. Over 18 million registered voters, registered hopeful voters will be casting that ballot, as is hoped by both the opposition and government. Let me just give you some figures off the bat. 95% of the voting desks have been installed. That is the number we're getting today. Earlier it was 90%, now it's 95%. So it looks like things are actually coming into place quickly before Sunday's regional elections. In preparation for that as well, 143,000 security officers, along with thousands more Bolivarian National Police and thousands more Bolivarian National Guards will be present on Sunday to accompany all of these election booths, election desks, as well as the voters, to ensure that there is safety and security. Now, we keep mentioning that a lot. We just have to keep reminding our viewers that safety and security are imperative and important to this regional elections. President Maduro, his government, have been at it really hard trying to create a sense of security for voters to go out. The last time there was an election process, the National Constituent Assembly elections, there was violence and there was vandalism. And this followed, of course, months of violent and deadly protests, quite frankly. So the nerves have been around here for Venezuelans who want to go out and vote, who want to go out and practice their democratic rights. So his government as well, President Maduro, has been trying to convince everyone that everything is fine and all right and ready for Sunday's vote. Now, just yesterday, 70 plus international electoral experts, along with 1,240 international observers, arrived in Venezuela. Their job really is to as most election observers do in any country, is to observe the elections, to make sure that it was all above board, all taking place, to ensure that the election has been free and fair, so they say. And of course, they've been welcomed here from across the United States, from across Europe, and of course, regionally here in Latin America. And those here as well, it's important that these international election observers are here because we are in a time in Venezuela where the country's democracy is being questioned by international forces and by a local opposition that has been spurning these international forces to intervene in Venezuela's affairs. These international observers are important right now, which is why we keep stressing their presence and keep reiterating that they will be here on Sunday and afterward to observe, to monitor. And afterward, they will be providing a report to the CNE, the National Electoral Council here in Venezuela, as to exactly what they've seen, what they've observed, and if there is anything that needs to be improved, they will give those recommendations as well. So as you saw in the clip, the international observers said that they are here for a specific reason. They will be going throughout different election polling stations on Sunday, and they'll be keeping a very close eye out for any discrepancy that can undermine the election results. Sonia.
Thank you so much for that report, Regan Devines. Regan Devines in Caracas. In the run-up to Sunday's regional elections, Talisio has traveled to the provinces, specifically to Teixeira State, to gauge the mood on the streets. We have more in this report.
In 2014, this avenue in San Cristobal, the capital city of Táchira State, was the epicenter of the opposition violence, where once a banner calling for a coup stood. Today, that banner has been replaced by a new one, which invites people to vote for the regional elections, rewriting the history of death and violence. This story of terrorism was repeated only 3 months ago, and the political parties who supported the violent protests are now participating in democracy, although they still insist that there is a dictatorship in Venezuela.
For there to be a peace after a dictatorship, there must be elections.
In a dictatorship, there are never any elections. There is nothing. But here in Venezuela, there's a lot of freedom of speech and expression.
Two main electoral options are available in Táchira. The first is a coalition candidate from a traditional opposition party, the Democratic Action, and the other is the Justice First Party, which is one of the political groups that led the violent protests and has called for international sanctions. The current governor of the state, José Vielma Mora, is part of the Justice First Party.
We want everything done peacefully. We don't want any violence here, and we don't want anyone to invade us here.
Here we continue to struggle against an empire. This is not an easy task, to fight and to battle against an empire from the poor areas. This is not a simple election. Looking beyond the passion of voting, this is a vote for the revolution. This is a vote to keep the revolution alive.
The revolution has to compromise in order to keep the peace. The opposition violence has left lasting scars, and here there are still some traces of how this free university was set on fire and damaged. It remains as a lasting symbol of the roughly 200 Venezuelans murdered in the street during opposition protests from 2014 to 2017. A victory for the opposition will give them hope that they will be able to put an end to the revolution and the government of Nicolas Maduro.
The tense standoff between Catalonia's leaders and the Spanish government is expected to continue over the weekend, ahead of Monday's deadline for the Catalan president to clarify whether he has declared independence or not. Joan Ortiz has the details from Barcelona.
¿Qué tal, compañeros? Saludos desde Barcelona. Las últimas noticias que tenemos
The latest news we have from Barcelona is that next week ordinary parliament activity will resume, as since September 5th the parliament has only been dealing with independence issues, something the opposition didn't like. What's expected on Wednesday and Thursday when this new session begins is to see if the coup will participate or not. After President Carles Puigdemont declared independence and suspended its effects, the coup expressed doubts about whether they would continue as a parliamentary group inside the parliament because they weren't sure that pro-independence policies will be maintained or whether more national policies will take their place. And this is decisive because the coup is the one that makes the independent process possible, which ensures he has a majority in the parliament and to have an absolute majority, so that could make it difficult for the pro-independent forces to make decisions. In any case, we have other news from Catalonia, including the fact that the Catalan government recently created an investigation commission into the police abuse of October 1st, and even though the Spanish government has given orders for this not to happen again, to try to prevent this commission, some prosecutors and judges have also been putting pressure on the Catalan government not to investigate this. From Madrid, Rafael Hernando, the Popular Party spokesperson in Congress, during a television interview said that the Spanish government is ready to use the force, and he also said he couldn't give any more details because that would be like telling the baddies what the goodies are going to do. In this way, he seemed to create a very clear division between the Catalans as the baddies and the Spanish as the goodies. Soraya Saez Santamaria also spoke this Friday during a ministerial council, and as usual, after this meeting, the spokesperson for the government came out to talk to the press, and she said Catalan finances will remain intervened regardless of what Puigdemont says, and that this is a weekend for the president of Catalonia to take it easy, to reflect about the response he will give to the government after Prime Minister Rajoy asked him to clarify if he had declared independence or not. Soraya Saez de Santamaria also said that what's happening in Catalonia is seriously damaging the Catalan economy and, as a consequence, the Spanish one. Finally, from the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker said he doesn't want an independent Catalonia because it could be copied in other regions within Europe who also look for national emancipation, and Europe can mediate between the parties, especially when one of them hasn't asked for mediation. That's the news as we go into the weekend. This weekend is expected to be calm, but calm before the storm.
Este es un fin de semana para que el presidente de Cataluña se lo tome con tranquilidad, reflexione sobre la respuesta que le va a dar.
Joanna Ortiz from Barcelona. More news in a minute. Stay with us. 3 weeks after Hurricane Irma, Puerto Rican leaders are warning of precarious health conditions and the lack of basic services. Health officials say that the service that they're giving is getting worse by the day because of the lack of supplies and medical equipment. They also fear the lack of drinking water, food, and electricity could aggravate the situation even more. President Trump has threatened on Twitter to withdraw U.S. emergency staff and blame Puerto Ricans for the island's financial crisis. Now, let's go to Dominica, where we track the recovery of the island after it was struck by Hurricane Maria. Almost 4 weeks after the hurricane, Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit announced through his Twitter account that all services have been restored at the Rosso Ferry Terminal, including departure tax, security, immigration, and customs. More than 30 people died on the Caribbean island as a result of Hurricane Maria. Peru's main opposition leader, Keiko Fujimori, has been summoned to Congress in Lima as part of an investigation into alleged corruption. Keiko Fujimori is accused of receiving millions of dollars in illegal funding for her presidential campaign last year. The money reportedly came from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, has the details.
Today, Keiko Fujimori, the former two-time presidential candidate and also the daughter of the ex-dictator Alberto Fujimori, who is now in jail for crimes against humanity and corruption, is being investigated. She was summoned to the National Congress to answer for her allegedly illicit campaign financing from the Brazilian firm Odebrecht. These accusations come from a first declaration from Marcelo Odebrecht, the director of the Brazilian firm, who said that he financed almost all of the Peruvian presidential candidates, and that Keiko Fujimori was no exception. However, he said that the person who has the details is the former director of the firm in Peru, Jorge Barata. But the suspicions grow because on Marcelo's cell phone was found a note that said, "Increase 500 to Keiko and make a visit." These clearly indicate, according to some investigations, that Keiko Fujimori received 500,000 more than the rest of the candidates. We also have to point in relation to these investigations in the Congress. There are many people who don't have faith that they will lead anywhere. Because let's recall, there's a Fujimorist majority in the Congress. What's really of concern to Keiko Fujimori is that she has also been included in an investigation by the prosecutor's office, where she is accused of leading a criminal organization and money laundering. Let's remember that during her campaign she didn't declare the origin of these millions in funds. She only said that it came from raffles and fundraising cocktail parties. That's the information that we have here. We come back to you, Soina.
Jaime Herrera reporting in Peru. The Vice President of Colombia has traveled to the south of the country to meet the relatives of the campesinos affected by the Tumaco massacre on October 5th. The official number of those killed in the massacre has risen to 7, although local communities still believe that there may be more victims. Oscar Naranjo heard angry protests from the community who want the security forces to leave the area. They say the government has not been respecting the terms of Colombia's peace process with its forced eradication of illicit crops. Trade unionists in Colombia are holding a week of protests over the government's economic and labor policies. Our correspondent, Milton Henao, has been at one of the demonstrations in Bogota and sent this report.
Demonstrations continue here in Bogota. Today we see that the unions are marching. Specifically, I'm here next to this group of customs officers and workers from the tax department, which are the bodies in charge of tax collection in the country. They're demanding 3 things. The first one is a raise of their salary. Secondly, the formalization of their contracts, because unfortunately right now they do not have a legal guarantee or their employment rights. And third, thousands of public workers in the streets.
Thank you so much for that report. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has met Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto in Mexico City as negotiations over the North American Free Trade Agreement continue. The Canadian leader insisted that the country will not abandon the NAFTA talks, while Peña Nieto said Mexico would keep working with Canada and the United States to reach a deal that was beneficial for all 3 countries.
We continue to believe that improving upon and modernizing NAFTA is the best way to create opportunities for our citizens, for our workers, for our businesses, to grow the economy and to help people in all 3 of our countries. That is why we remain committed to the NAFTA process, because we know that it has created millions of jobs.
Bien atento a lo que esté ocurriendo realmente en las mesas de negociación.
Be attentive to what is really happening at the negotiating table. Whatever statements are made or positions are expressed outside the negotiations is just speculation. Yesterday, I believe President Trump mentioned creative reforms to find a solution to this negotiation process. I believe that Mexico and Canada share the view that the NAFTA agreement is a good mechanism. It is not the only one, but it is a good mechanism to strengthen the development of the North American region, to make it one of the most competitive and productive in the world.
A genocide trial is restarting in Guatemala against the former military leader, Efrain Rios Montt. Rios Montt was found guilty in 2013 of genocide, but a series of legal maneuvers forced the sentence to be suspended. The judges ordered the entire trial process to begin again. The former dictator led a counterinsurgency war in the 1980s, which killed some 200,000 people, most of them indigenous civilians. Our correspondent, Mario Rosales, has sent this report on the case.
Hola, ¿qué tal, compañeros? Bueno, acá en la ciudad capital de Guatemala se reanuda el juicio por genocidio en contra del general José Efraín Ríos Montt.
Here in Guatemala City, the genocide trial against General José Efraín Ríos Montt is restarting. However, this trial is not public and it's taking place without the presence of former leader because he was declared by local justice and forensic authorities as a person who's mentally incapable of facing a legal process. We should remember that the Constitutional Court annulled the genocide sentence against him, which was given in 2013. Since then, there has been a lot of back and forth of legal measures, and today this trial is restarting. He's been accused of crimes against humanity for the deaths of Mayan exiles in the year of 1982 in the north of Guatemala. The sentence was annulled, but the trial is being resumed, and we'll see what happens if a new sentence is reached to confirm he is guilty of genocide or if the issue will still be avoided through different legal measures from the Guatemala justice system. Back to the studio.
Dándole vueltas en ir y venir de recursos por parte de la defensa en la justicia guatemalteca. Volvemos con ustedes allá al set central.
That was Mario Rosales in Guatemala. One Sinca indigenous community in Guatemala has been reduced to rubble by a nearby mine. You have more in this report.
This is a town called the Ghost Community. Officially, its name is La Cuchilla, but it was reduced to rubble after operations began at the San Rafael mine just outside the community.
Well, previously, this was a beautiful town with all of the comforts you can imagine. Unfortunately, the mining company came and turned it into a ghost town because they destroyed all of the houses.
Until 2004, more than 90 families lived here in La Cuchilla. Now there are only 16, who say they suffer exclusion, even from the Christian faith.
The priest, as you can see, had the images removed and padlocks put on, so that the people who live here can't get in. It's a way of pressing people to sell their land.
What happened in the community of La Cuchilla, according to the people taking part in the local territorial assembly, is an example of what they call savage capitalism.
Que esto es una economía del delito, lo hemos llamado en algún momento porque realmente
because of the blood of families in these rural communities, they are making money and don't care what they destroy.
In the municipality of Casilla, Santa Rosa, peaceful resistance continue against the San Rafael mine. Those affected are some of those most active in the social and popular assembly.
These are communities in resistance. These people who are really suffering the reality of this country and all its effects. They are saying no to mining, no to hydroelectric plants, no to agribusiness.
The Social and Popular Assembly is holding consultative meetings all parts of Guatemala, examining the structural and historical problems that harm the communities.
Santiago Botón, Telesur, Guatemala.
Thousands of representatives of Argentina's indigenous communities gathered in Buenos Aires on Thursday to demand the extension of a law preventing native communities from losing their land. During the rally, demonstrators called for the return of the missing political activist Santiago Maldonado and the resignation of the Argentine Minister of Security Patricia Bullrich. They chained themselves to the outside of the National Congress and spoke in favor of the Indigenous Land Emergency Law, which is due to expire in November. Chile's vulnerable Humboldt pigeons have thwarted for now at least $1 billion mining project in one of the country's most depressed regions. The rare species is only found on the coast of Peru and Chile, which have created the National Humboldt Pigeon Reserve, but it's also an area rich in natural resources. So when the Andes Iron Mining Company announced its plan to open a huge open-cast mine and build a port nearby, conservationists managed to block the project to protect the pigeons. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Russia, Germany, France, and Britain have all reacted against the decision by the U.S. President Donald Trump to decertify the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement.
God bless America.
The president spoke on the Iran deal, which was signed by former President Obama. The original deal lifted sanctions on Iran in exchange for limits on its nuclear program. Trump's refusal to certify the deal comes in the face of widespread global support for the agreement. International observers say Iran has been in total compliance with the deal.
Our policy is based on a clear-eyed assessment of the Iranian dictatorship, its sponsorship of terrorism, and its continuing aggression in the Middle East and all around the world.
The Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has responded to Trump. He said the U.S. president was more isolated than ever and that Iran would continue to implement the nuclear deal.
As long as our interests are in joint comprehensive plan of action, as long as the interests of the country require, and as long as our country benefits from the plan of action, we respect this agreement within the framework of national interest. If one day our interests are not met, and the opposing sides do not want to fulfill their obligations, know that Iran will not hesitate for a moment and will respond to them.
Now here's a roundup of other news from around the world.
2 opposition protesters have been shot dead after a group attempted to storm a police station in the southwestern town of Bondo. The incident comes despite Thursday's government ban on demonstrating in the lead-up to the rescheduled presidential election on October 26. The opposition leader Raila Odinga has announced he will not be running on October 26 due to the lack of electoral reforms following August's annulled election result. The opposition strongholds of Mombasa, Kisumu and parts of the capital have seen almost daily demonstrations in the lead-up to the rescheduled election. China has reconfirmed its commitment to the UN's cultural agency UNESCO during a statement by the Foreign Ministry in Beijing. The announcement comes following news that the United States will be pulling out of the organization on grounds that it conveys an anti-Israeli bias.
The principle of the UNESCO is to promote international collaboration in education, science and culture, boost mutual understanding and fusion between the people of the world, maintain the world's peace and realize common development.
Turkish tanks rolled into the countryside of Syria's northern Idlib province in what appears to be a move to set up observation points. However, the move of 30 military vehicles into the rebel-held region is also seen as a way to counter the growth of the Kurdish YPG, who hold much of northern Syria. The move comes amidst heightened tensions between a Kurdish independence movement and its regional neighbours following a referendum which was held last month in neighbouring Iraq. Ankara came out strongly against the yes vote and is seen to be increasing its military presence on its borders. The death toll from flooding in northern and central Vietnam has reached 54 and an estimated 39 people remain missing. The flash flooding, which began last week, is said to be the worst in years. Some 317 homes have collapsed as a result of the floods, while an estimated 34,000 homes have been submerged or damaged. Rescue operations are underway across 6 provinces as emergency services begin the search for survivors in the latest disaster. Families of the victims from the Seoul ferry disaster are demanding a thorough investigation by the new government into the tragedy 3 years on. Gathered nearby the presidential Blue House in the South Korean capital, relatives of some of the 300 victims demand the truth in what is the country's worst maritime disaster on record. Former South Korean President Park Geun-hye was heavily criticised for her response to the incident. On April 16th in 2014, the Seoul passenger ferry capsized off the coast of South Korea's island of Jindo. Among the 476 passengers on board, only 172 were rescued.
We've come to the end of this evening's news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesiotv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesio English, I am Suni Gray. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely weekend.